The Checkpoint is presented by GM Pharma, the first international multinational pharmaceutical company in Georgia. GM Pharma, to serve those who need it most.
In October 2022 in Georgia, the hotel price index decreased by 7.6% compared to September 2022, according to the PMC Research Center. The 3-star, 4-star and 5-star hotel price index decreased by 9.2%, while for guest houses, the price index decreased by 7.7%. The monthly HPI was the highest in Samegrelo Zemosvaneti and lowest in Adjara and Shida Kartli. Georgian Economy Minister Levan Davitashvili on Thursday said the government would ensure transformation of the country into a transit corridor and logistics hub that would make rapid transportation and communication available for businesses on two continents. The Georgian official drew attention to CAREC's new post-pandemic framework document, which provides green, sustainable and inclusive recovery of the economy. It is a framework that allows us to enhance cooperation and productivity across the region through digitization, innovation and investment. This will allow us to be resilient to future challenges, rebuild trade and become stronger, more connected and more inclusive, he said. In 10 months of 2022, wine exports increased by 6.2%, according to Geostat. In January-October of this year, almost USD 201 million worth of wine was exported from Georgia. Wine exports to Russia are significantly up. According to statistics, USD 129 million worth of wine was exported to Russia in 10 months, while this indicator was USD 106 million in the corresponding period last year. The increase was 21.6%. Also, Russia's share in total exports has increased to almost 65%. Poland follows Russia, which replaced Ukraine in wine exports. In the past years, it was Ukraine that was the second market for wine produced in Georgia. According to Geostat, wine worth of 12.3 million USD is exported to Poland. China takes the third place with the USD 10.5 million. This is The Checkpoints. I'm Elena Guangelashvili, host and the author of the show, and The Checkpoints team is ready to give you the most important news and analysis on business and economics. But before we start our Business and Economics Week, let me invite you to Georgia. Bistumari of Georgia, great stories guaranteed. This is how Georgia will be positioning itself for global visitors.
Stumari is a Georgian word for guest. And hardly in Georgia there exists any other rank higher than that of Stumari. Stumari is a gift of God, said someone a long time ago, and we all agreed. As you touch Georgian land, better fasten your napkin, as you will be taken to the wild ride of feasts and toasts, and whoos, and have some mores. Stumari deserves a royal rest. And when you're ready to see some more, don't ask internet, ask your nearest Georgian. Each of us has already planned where to take you next.
Follow the trail to the magic lakes.
Go where wine was born.
Drive to ancient caves.
Browse the street market.
Jump in the waves. Have a breath of fresh air.
Bar hop through Old City.
Take a break from your smartphone. Soak in nature. Go see capital of poets.
Sing with our friends.
Dance through the night.
Meet the sky and the mountains.
Stumari is our pleasure, our calling, and our mission is unchanged, to make you fall in love and may that love always bring you back. Be Stumari of Georgia. Great stories guaranteed.
Yes, indeed, great stories guaranteed. And now, how related are competition and the well-being of a country? What should Georgia do to ensure the enforcement of consumer protection laws? How efficient is the National Competition Agency of Georgia? These are some of the questions that our analyst Georgi Aronia discussed with the head of competition and consumer policies at the United Nations Conference on Trade and Development, Teresa Moreira.
Ms. Moreira, thank you for being with us today.
My pleasure.
Look, the first question I want to ask you is very global. What is the situation in the world right now in terms of limitation of competition and abuse of power by the marketplaces, by the people involved here? Well, what could you tell me about this?
Well, I think there are clear trends, especially since the pandemic outbreak. So I would say for the last 2.5 years, which come from the rising power of big tech. So digital platforms really became indispensable for all of us as consumers or as businesses because of the lockdown situation. And we are not seeing consumers or businesses going back to previous habits, on the other way around, I would say, across the world. This, of course, allowed these big tech players to enhance their already considerable market power through a number of mergers and acquisitions, often under the radar of competition authorities, because they may be of startups or young, innovative firms. And what we are seeing is that global players, despite being global, they look at the world as a single market, but they do not abide by data protection of consumers or by consumer rights across the world. So this is clearly a trend and a challenge. So digital markets raise concerns both from the competition and the consumer protection side. It is extremely important that competition authorities and consumer protection agencies are able to exchange information, knowledge, experience, explore, when possible, collaboration or joint activities, so that these abusive or unfair behaviors are flagged in time for them to act. One thing that I want to mention that I believe it's an interesting development is that already pre-pandemic, a number of competition authorities, even of developing countries, started exploring interactive tools to identify cartels, to flag abusive behavior. And that is an interesting use of technology. So of course, big tech are on the rise, but let's say competition and consumer protection enforcers can also make the most out of technology to be better equipped. At the same time, we have noticed that competition authorities across the world are investing in data analytics, which became, let's say, the biggest issue at stake, because they need to understand how these new business models work before they start forbidding behavior or imposing sanctions.
Big part of the success of the competition law in general comes to enforcement. How do you envision what should be done and what should Georgia do because for our country this is a relatively new field, what should we do to ensure that the laws are enforced properly and so that no one abuses the power that they have?
That is a very interesting question. Yes, I do believe that it is important to have a legal and institutional framework, as you have in Georgia already for some years. So I believe competition law was enacted in 2014. Of course, everywhere, even in the most developed countries, it takes a while for a competition authority to assert itself. It is very important to enforce the law respecting due process, so allowing for the rights of defense of businesses, and to make sure in a way that your decisions are sound and can be confirmed by judicial control, which usually is also in place. Why is this important? Because only after a competition authority has demonstrated its enforcement capacity can then the authority have open a dialogue with business in order to prevent abusive behavior or anti-competitive practices, or in order to discuss possible commitments or remedies, namely in merger cases. But for this dialogue to be effective, the authority needs to be respected, needs to be considered. And this only comes after law enforcement. So it is a process. It usually takes some time because investigations are long. Again, you need, in a way, to be generating public support. Why am I mentioning this? Because this is something that is very important for any competition authority. You need to be able to generate public support. And this means to say that you need to explain the society, so of course the market, but also society, why competition is beneficial, what is there to gain, and at the same time, you need to explain and engage your stakeholders in the process so that, you know, if you are doing an inspection on site, a business premises, this is understood as an investigative tool to gather relevant information, but not necessarily an intrusive measure. And also with the judiciary, when they need to authorize, for instance, they need to issue warrants for this type of inspections to take place, they need to understand in advance what this is all about. Because usually, typically inspections and things like that were reserved for major infringements of criminal nature, you see. So you need to, while you are enforcing law, you need to be raising awareness, informing, advocating for competition in your market, in your society, with your counterparts and stakeholders. And this takes time. And at the same time, it needs to continue. It's not just because the agency has had, let's say, 5 very successful decisions that are confirmed by courts that you can relax and think, oh, now everybody knows what I do and why we do it. You still need to be concerned about that to get this public support. So it is a process.
You know, for Georgia, we are in a odd situation right now because in general, our legal system is heading towards European harmonization. You know, and given this context and given the fact that the competition agency and the business is a relatively new phenomenon here, there might be some sort of dual problem. You know, how do we we ensure the development of the independent system, and then we have to harmonize it with the European system in a way. So what your advices would be to the national agency?
I think that is also an important point, but I think let's say the good news, so to speak, is that a lot of countries have been through that process, and I have observed in my past experience how joining the EU and harmonizing the EU allowed for an enhancement of the competition of competition law and policy in the country, and how much was offered by the cooperation with other European member states and European competition authorities. I think the positive side of this is that because of your country's views towards the EU, there is a strong encouragement to follow, I would say, frankly, the state of the art best practices, even when they are a little bit, how can I put it, demanding vis-a-vis some sectors of economic activity or some businesses. But this has happened, I think, in a lot of countries that have joined the EU in the past 30 years. This is a stimulus. And I think, again, what is important is to explain to the private sector that these requirements, which may sometimes seem burdensome or not understandable, will allow them to have access to the biggest single market in the world, and where, of course, where all businesses have opportunities, but also where consumers tend to be quite demanding because they are used to have very wide choice, very good quality, very good prices. But this is really a stimulus for economic activities to flourish, even though the process can be a hard one. But I do believe that it is important to explain this to businesses according, let's say, to the language used in markets, and not just through invoking legislation or international law provisions, because that does not necessarily make the deal. And I have seen that throughout the world, you need to adjust your language according to the audience interests, needs, and expectations. You cannot talk to an expert in a public body the same way that you talk to a small somebody who has a family business and who can legitimately ask, why now do I have to organize everything differently? You see, what's in it for me? And the competition authority needs to be able to explain this. I believe that in Georgia, the competition system already has embedded a number of key issues that are fully compliant with the European competition law, to go back to competition. Therefore, I don't think that is a major challenge. For instance, the recent legal amendments already reflected a number of key issues that are important for the EU and other developed countries. So that, I think that is the process. Of course, the interesting part was to explain, and I had the privilege of being a little bit involved in that in 2017, to explain to members of parliament and even to interact with ministers to really confirm how important and why some amendments were necessary or relevant. But I do believe that you are in the right track.
As you just mentioned, you visited Georgia back in 2017. Based on your experience back then and on your experience now, as I know you've met with the chairman of the Georgian National Agency of Competition, how would you rate their willingness, their political will, their capabilities, and do we have, as a country, do we have enough tools and willpower to push the consumer protection reform through?
Well, I was very impressed with the amendments, because I can tell you, it is frequent that authorities identify areas for improvement in the legal and institutional framework. It's not a given that the government and parliament will agree with these amendments. So I think in a rather short period of time, and even throughout the pandemic, a major global pandemic, in Georgia you were able to amend the law. I think it was very interesting. It was very interesting to add this new mandate on consumer protection. I do believe that is very modern, I should say. So you see, that is the advantage of a lot of developing countries or economies in transition, is that you can leapfrog. You do not need to go through the process of anybody else, and you do it your own way, according to your own priorities, which is the right way. I was very impressed also with what I heard about the close cooperation with sector-specific regulators. I should tell you that that is not a given, even in several developed countries. I think definitely sectors like energy, telecommunications, and the financial services regulator, these are key issues both for markets, so for businesses and for consumers, because everybody needs energy to produce in a plant, or you need telecommunications to do your business online or in other forms. As a consumer, we are also dependent on these services, and of course, and banking services and payments and insurance are essential for people's and businesses' lives. So I was very impressed with that. I think it also sends a very powerful message to the market, you see, that there is this collaboration, that business cannot just knock on each of the regulator's door and with a different story, because they will be caught, let's say, if they try a different approach. I think that is very reassuring also for consumers, that there is this collaboration and that there is this network that can really pursue competitive markets that work for consumers in the best possible manner. So I'm really impressed, and I think that's why I suggested that the regulators and the agency, who of course comes to my intergovernmental meetings in Geneva, that come and share this experience. So I think you are in the right track. Now, having said this, you still have, like everybody, work ahead to fully assert competition law and policy. I'm not fully aware of the current economic situation details in Georgia, but what I mentioned earlier in my intervention, that with the pandemic we saw a rise of state intervention in the economy, you know, the launch of economic recovery packages, and that runs the risk of unbalancing markets, of privileging some companies according to discriminatory and non-transparent conditions, and of creating a sort of fixed structure in markets. And it's very important that the competition authority and the regulators are extremely attentive. And so doing competition advocacy used to be considered a sort of complementary task of competition authorities, but it's clear that it is as important as law enforcement, because in a lot of countries across the world, public restraints in markets are a serious cause of lack of competition. So it is important that the competition authority and the sector regulators also work together in improving the enabling business environment. And this is essential also for investors to come, because you need to have a predictability. You need to have predictability. You need to have a stable environment to come and invest. And this is essential for a country that is growing like your own.
Well, thank you very much for your time. It's a pleasure.
It was a pleasure. Thank you.
How did the week look like for the business in Georgia? Our reporter Natia Taktakishvili has pulled together this week's Business Wire.
3 more Carter stores will be opened in Georgia in 2023. Nana Chanturia, the head of the franchise management department of Gefa Company, told TV program Business Morning. Gefa Company opened the first official store of American brand Carter's on the 3rd floor of Galleria Tbilisi on November 21, and as noted, interest in the brand was high on the first day. The company initially invested $2 million to bring the brand to the country, but as Nana Chanturia says, the investment will triple within the opening of new stores in 2023. From 2023, over 3 stores will be added to Carter, which will be present both in Tbilisi and in other cities. So far, the exact investment have not been announced, although this number will 3-fold more, said Nana Chanturia. Brand Sugar Free, a producer of healthy desserts, appeared on the market a year ago. According to the manager of the startup, Look Up to our demand for products is growing so much that it's planned to open a new branch next year. We started production a year ago. We expected that it would take us at least 2-3 years to establish on the market, but the reality exceeded our expectations. The demand is so great that we will open a new branch in the near future. Today, our store operates at Kazbeki 30, where desserts are made on the spot. Our products are presented in Goodwill and Food and Markets, said Luca Pziauri. The range of products in sugar-free is constantly updated. Luca Pziauri notes that they have added new recipes, and in the future they plan to add jam, peanut butter and various sweets. As for the price policy, the manager of sugar-free says they only have a minimum price tag and the products are intended for the middle-income segment. Supermarket chain AgroHub has published its financial report for 2021. According to the document, last year the company's income increased by 22% and reached 154 million GLR. In addition, the net profit of the company increased by the threefold and reached 12 million GLR. AgroHub is represented by 3 supermarkets throughout Georgia. 2 of them are located in Tbilisi and 1 is located in Batumi. In addition, the company expects to open 2 more supermarkets in the next 2 years and accordingly to double its income. As of the financial report, AgroHub made a net profit of 12.4 million GLR. As of the report, the assets of AgroHub amounts to 65.5 million GLR. According to the document, the owner of the 100% share of the company is businessman Akaki Akhlediyani. Premium alcohol importer GD Alco declares that the growth of HoReCa sector has improved sales dynamics. According to Beka Kiknadze, director of sales and marketing of the company, 2022 has been the best for the company in the last 3 years. Compared to the last year, our volumes have increased by about 30%. We are having the best year ever and we are going back to the sales of 2019. After the war, many Russian and Belarusian citizens came to the country. After the start of Russia-Ukraine war, the HoReCa sector has doubled compared to last year, especially in Tbilisi and Batumi, Beka Kiknadze said. According to him, along with the increase in sales, the mix of products sold by the company has also changed. If cheaper drinks were sold before, today expensive products are sold. This dynamic will continue for several months and will last until the middle of next year, said representative of GD Alco, adding that the company has not increased price this year as the exchange rate of GLR has stabilized and no price increase is planned until the end of 2022. GD Alco imports the country such well-known whiskey brands as Jack Daniels, Jameson, Martin, Johnnie Walker, Baileys and Jägermeister. The first fitness center was opened in Mestia. The founder of the center, Lali Pavliashvili, told BMG that after moving from Tbilisi to Mestia, she saw that there was no space where the people could relax or exercise, so she decided to create Setup Mestia. According to her, the center is completely focused on the local population. Over 10-12 people can train in the Setup Mestia at the same time, while the gym can serve up to 40 people during the day. As for the challenges, the founder of fitness center says that the lack of local personnel is still the main challenge. I had routine challenges. I couldn't find workers. Sometimes everything didn't work as I had planned, Lali Pavlishvili says. As for the prices, it varies from 50 GLR to 130 GLR. The first fitness center of Mestia was created with the financing of European Union and Austria. The grant amounted to 70,000 GLR, to which Lali Pavliashvili added personal investment, the amount of which she does not specify at this stage. Basis Bank continues to support the hotel industry and hospitality sector. Another new 40-room Hotel Kutaisi was opened in Kutaisi with the financing of the bank and within the framework of the Hosting Georgia project. The total cost of the project is 1 million GLR, of which Basis Bank provided financial support of more than 800,000 GLR. The company also benefited from the co-financing of the state project host in Georgia. The hotel employs local staff. Construction of the hotel started in 2019 and hosted the first guest in May of this year. Hotel Hill Kutaisi offers relaxation in a comfortable and cozy environment to both local and foreign guests, adapted for people with disabilities. Hotel Hill Kutaisi is located in the historical district of Kutaisi. I would like to thank Bazisbank team and the Ministry of Economy of Georgia for their support and contribution to the successful completion of the mentioned project. I would like more similar projects to be implemented in our region, which will contribute to the development of tourism, said Shota Ochigawa. Motorcars were the largest import commodity group in 10 months 2022, which exceeded to $1 million USD and accounted for 11.4% of the total imports. As car importers say, the demand for both new and second-hand vehicles imported to the country is growing. According to them, in terms of demand, second-hand cars are most in demand, one of the reasons for which is the shortage of new cars. According to Kakhalomidze, the head of Distances Department of Caucasus Auto Import, the price dynamic is also increasing, which has been maintained since the pandemic. There is a huge shortage of new cars. Buying a new car is a problem because if you want to buy it, you have to wait about 6 months, sometimes even a year, for a new car due to the regulations in the supply of raw materials. Accordingly, the demand for the second-hand cars is increasing and the price have also increased by about 20-25%, says Kakhalomidze, head of the remote sales department.
The Austrian-Georgia Business Forum, which was held in Tbilisi last week, in attendance were the representatives of 7 Austrian companies, as well as the Secretary General of the Austrian Federal Economic Chamber, Karl-Heinz Kopf. Our reporter and analyst, Georgi Aronia, had the pleasure of an exclusive interview, and he will highlight some main points for the checkpoints. Hi, Georgi. What was the main focus of the interview?
Hi, Elena. Last week, I had the opportunity to interview the Secretary General of the Austrian Federal Economic Chamber, Karl-Heinz Kopf. We talked about the trade relations between our two states and discussed what could be done to improve them.
Well, I think we have traditionally good relations between the two countries, and we always try to strengthen these relations. What can we do? I think one of the possibilities is to strengthen the economic relations. And well, in the last time, I think there had been some interesting investments from Austrian companies like Rauch, for example, together with a partner here in Georgia. And I think that could be the way, or one main way to strengthen the relations. And there is a lot of potential here in Georgia. The GDP has grown last year by 10%. Probably this year it will grow again in that dimension. So we feel that there is high potential and big interest forcing the economy, and therefore we came here with a business delegation to present Austrian companies together with the officials of Georgia, the possibilities and the opportunities here. In general, I think it could be interesting to force foreign investments from Austria here in the country, because in Austria we have one big problem. We are missing about 200,000 employees we would need to fulfill all the growth we could have. So our companies are asked to go outside with their production. So why not to Georgia? You have a higher unemployment rate, so there are people able to work. That could be a possibility, and then probably export these products produced here not only for the Georgian market but for a bigger market overall. And so that could be very interesting. So to bring investments, foreign investments to Georgia in production in several fields, also with the opportunity to strengthen exports via that way. That could be, I think, one of the main successful ways for Georgia.
Georgian wine, of course, is a very important export commodity for our country, yet the numbers are very low. Annually, Georgia exports around 90,000 USD worth of wine to Austria.
I think, therefore, it would be necessary to make it more known in Austria. We have a lot of exhibitions on wine in Austria to present the product. I think the main thing is to make the products of the wineries here known, better known in Austria and other Western countries. Otherwise, it's not. And to find some importers, to find some companies selling wines in a bigger round to bring them to Austria. But also, therefore, our organization, the Chamber, could be helpful to support also Georgian companies to go that way to Austria. Not normally, our main goal in the Chamber of Commerce is to support Austrian companies to go outside, but why not vice versa?
For Georgia, attracting foreign direct investment is a key priority. That is why I asked Mr. Kopf about what Georgia could do to attract Austrian investors. According to Mr. Kopf, ensuring the protection of the rights of investors must be a key priority.
Well, what is needed for a company to go somewhere? It's security, it's stable political situation, it's security for your investments. You can be sure on them. I think the legal framework around is important, and to invest here, it's necessary. As I said, in Austria we are missing that to have potential for employers, to find enough employers to work in such factories or in plants to be established here. And in several countries we have a lack of employers. In Germany, in Austria, for example, and also in other countries. So even in the Western European EU countries, Czech Republic, Poland, and so on, they all, it's not interesting to go there for an Austrian company because they don't find the necessary employers there. So that could be one point. Besides some other things, the topographic, the geographic situation is very interesting, rather similar with mountains and very attractive. So to invest also in tourism would be an interesting thing. But the main thing at the moment, Austrian companies are missing are employers. So we have to look, we have two possibilities: to bring employers from abroad to Austria. It's not so easy. Or to go outside with our investments to countries where we find people looking for employment. And I think that should be probably brought to the mind of Austrian companies more than at the moment it does.
Thank you, Georgi, for very interesting insights from your interview. And we will continue with more on the week in the economy right now.
The Georgian government on Monday announced the handover of state-owned real estate to 123 internally displaced families in Tbilisi and 80 other municipalities of the country, as well as the launch of a new 5-year, 225 million GLR water supply project in the central Khachuri municipality. With regard to the water supply project, the government administration said it would see the existing water supply and drainage system completely replaced in the municipality. The upgrade will include installation of 160 kilometers of supply pipes, 45-kilometer drainage system network, and a modern water treatment plant. After the principal infrastructure for drinking water and reservoirs is renovated, the project is expected to benefit 24,000 residents. Effective January 1, 2023, Georgian Health Ministry will introduce hourly wage for doctors and nurses. The change provides a doctor's minimum hourly wage of 7 gelari per hour, which equals to a monthly salary of 1,260 gelari, while a nurse minimum hourly pay will be 4.4 gelari per hour. Monthly salary will equal to 792 per month. The ministry explained that the salary increase would affect up to 9,000 doctors and over 8,000 nurses. From 2023 onward, all healthcare facilities involved in the state program will be required to follow the same salary calculation rule. Tbilisi Mayor Kakhaladze stated during a municipal government meeting that the funding from the Asia Development Bank of $16 million expanded the subway station infrastructure improvement project. The project will cover 4 stations, the construction of brand new exits at 2 sites, and the upgrading of above-ground infrastructure at 12 stations. With the funding from the Asia Development Bank within the framework of the investment program from the Sustainable Development of Cities, the project increasing the accessibility of Tbilisi metro stations and improving the external infrastructure is underway. The estimated cost of which is $16 million. The project includes increasing access to 4 Tbilisi metro stations: Ahmet Ali, Theatre, Didube, Delisi, and Technical University. In particular, the arrangement of additional exits. In addition, it includes the improvement of the above-ground infrastructure for 12 metro stations, said Kakhaladze. According to Kaladze, state procurement for the technical economic study and detailed design of the metro stations is now underway. The deal with the selected contractors will most likely to be signed in May. In Q3 2022, the number of Georgian resident travelers trips abroad equaled 6,093,400, which is 3.9 times higher compared to the data from the same period of the previous years. The preliminary data from the National Statistics Office of Georgia shows. As of the report, the number of outbound visits by Georgian visitors from above-mentioned number made up 531.8 thousand, which is 3.3 times higher compared to the data from the same period of 2021. The majority of outbound visits, 48.9%, were made by the visitors of age group of from 31 to 50 years old. The number of visitors made by women equal to 48.7% of the total number of visits. The expenditures during the visits made in Q3 2022 equal to 54 million gelari. The average expenditure on the visit amounted to over 1,000 gelari. The municipality has regained approximately 80,000 square meters of land near Zuri Park, said Tbilisi Mayor Kakhaladze. Modern history and culture in the capital are tightly moving into Zuri Park, Kakhaladze noted. Negotiations with private owners have been ongoing for several years. As a result, the municipality regained around 80,000 square meters of land, said Kakhaladze, adding that Tbilisians will have more space for entertainment and recreation. Georgian Economy Minister Levan Davitashvili on Thursday said the government would ensure transformation of the country into a transit corridor and logistic hub that would make rapid transportation and communication available for businesses on 2 continents. The Ministry of Economy cited Davitashvili as having made the statement at the ministerial conference of the Central Asia Regional Economic Cooperation Program hosted in online format on Thursday. The Georgian official drew attention to CARE's new post-pandemic framework document which provides green, sustainable and inclusive recovery of the economy. He also told the conference its strategy document, CARES 2023, was very ambitious and comprehensive and covered all trade and economic areas outlined in special operation clusters. Georgian Prime Minister Irakli Garibashvili on Tuesday laid the foundation for the construction of a new NATO standard base for the country's special operations forces in an event marking the 23rd anniversary of their establishment. The head of the government said the 70 million GLR project, including construction of 24 new buildings and renovation of 3 other facilities at Mukhrovani base in eastern Georgia's Kakheti region. As promised, one of the outstanding modern special operation forces center will be built at the Mukhrovani base, which will be fully compliant with NATO standards. He announced, noting the construction would be completed in 2 years. In recent years, we have taken important steps, implemented a number of interesting projects, and today we all together are celebrating the start of truly large-scale project at Mukhrovani base, he said.
Georgia became an IFC member and shareholder in 1995. IFC has provided long-term financing in financial services, agribusiness, manufacturing and infrastructure. Here's more from our interview.
IFC has a very specific and very focused agenda of what we want to do in Georgia, so I was here to discuss that with our partners. So first, we know that Georgia has had very good economic statistics in 2022 coming out of COVID. The growth of the first half of the year was 10.5%. FDI flows into the country the second half of 2022 is 9%. But I would say, for us, how we see things globally, there are challenges. The coming out of COVID, I think, presents itself structural economic challenges. We know the war in Ukraine is creating also regional economic and supply chain challenges. We are seeing inflation, energy prices are going up, and of course we can't ignore right now COP happening in Sharm el-Sheikh in Egypt and the climate challenge. So what is IFC looking to do in Georgia? It would be around these themes. We are looking to support the ongoing climate transition and supporting the Georgian private sector in developing more climate-related investments. We are looking to support them in what I would say is a very strategic and important time for the country. It is its economic presence, its geographic presence as a bridge across several important regions, and also to help support the growth of the small and medium-sized enterprises, the SMEs. How can IFC help support them and help the country diversify its economic base?
Ms. Karac, at the same time, despite ongoing challenges, as you have mentioned, and structural reforms and some other basic urgent needs, let me say so, for the further structural reforms needed, this crisis created some opportunities. Unfortunately, the price of these opportunities are quite high due to the ongoing war happening between Ukraine and Russia, but at the same time, logistic and a lot of things has been changed. Middle corridor is becoming more and more important. Yes. As you absolutely correctly mentioned, Georgia, due to its geographical location, should strengthen more and more its ability to be like a part of various states in it. Do you think we have some more capacity building in this direction to have more assets, more structural, not just reforms, but at the same time, some more capacities where IFC is ready to assist, advise, and participate?
Yes, thank you. I think you've very correctly pointed out and framed the issue. It is in a very strategic corridor, right, between EU, South Caucasus, Turkey, Central Asia. And I would say after speaking with all of the partners, the private sector and government, there's definitely an observation of this strategic relevance and the need to do something. What are some of the things that the country should do? So one is, I think, needs to beef up the infrastructure, the east-west corridor. I think it's critical that the transport and connectivity, both physical and digital connectivity in the country, be embraced and developed. That can be done in partnership with the government and the private sector. Right. I think both parties can play a role. Further developing the coast and the ports to decongest it and to provide that alternate supply route. What I would also say is, in doing that, I don't think it's just a one-size-fits-all. I think you have to look at diversifying the economy and building the various small and medium-sized enterprises to help create new kinds of businesses. We know Georgia has been a big center for tourism, and it's generated a lot of foreign exchange. But I would say we need to build up the agribusiness sector, we need to build up the small enterprises, and to do that you need to give them access to finance, you need to help them embrace digital technology to leapfrog development, and you also need to really build and support the development of human capital, which is critical for the country.
This is all for today. We will meet next Sunday, 11 a.m. sharp. Before that, check all the updates, news and analysis on BM.G and Forbes.G. Till Sunday, I will be leaving you off with a very interesting interview with the Ambassador of Germany to Georgia, Peter Fischer, on Georgia's EU perspective and much more.
Thank you so much for visiting us, Mr. Ambassadors, and hope you enjoyed staying here with us. Your background is quite followed with economics, climate changes, energy portions and things like that. Can we consider that besides politics, it will be main areas what you're going to be following as a general purpose of your work, what you're going to be doing for next years in Georgia?
Well, economics, politics, it's all connected.
Indeed.
So my main focus is going to be to accompany Georgia and to support Georgia on its path towards the European Union. Georgia has declared it wants that membership, and we, the European Union, have said we welcome the membership. And so the main focus, the framework of my work is supporting Georgia on that path. I'm sure we'll talk more about that.
Yes,
the details of those paths as we go along.
How we're doing, that's going to be my next question.
Yes, and but that path is, of course, not only a political development. Much of it will have to do with the economy, with being ready to be part of the single European market. And I would like to take my experience and put it into value in Georgia. I would be delighted if after a few years of doing service here, I could say there were some economic projects that I had a part in, that created jobs, that advanced skills, that brought income, prosperity to Georgia. Yes, so that would be very nice indeed.
Okay, Mr. Ambassador, you mentioned about Georgia standing on the road to European integration. How far we are?
I think you are doing pretty good. What we understand is that the will of the Georgian people across the board is very strong. You know, to join the European Union, there's three elements that candidate countries or countries that wish to join have to bring. The first is obvious. You have to share the values and the goals of the European Union. We're like a club. We want people to share our goals and values. The second, and that's a principal part of goals and values, you have to be a sustainable, pluralistic democracy. We're a club of democracies. There's no place for undemocratic states in our union. And the third is the economic aspect. The economy of the country that wishes to join has to be ready to withstand pressures that come with the internal market. Once you're in the EU, it's one market. There's no customs, there's no kind of protection for your market, for your companies from the competition. So it has to be a mature economy. And Georgia on all those areas is making good progress. There's more progress to be made. Right now you have what we call the European perspective.
Correct.
At some point we'll follow the candidate status, and once you have the candidate status, we begin official negotiations, and those negotiations have to lead to a point where the European Union says Georgia has achieved the acquis. In other words, has transposed the full body of European regulation, laws, and standards, or is ready to transpose that in the short term. And that's a giant task, because the full body of European legislation, regulation, and standards, it has to do with the political, the way the state is organized, the judiciary, and so on. But then every detail of public life, the quality of the water, the safety of the pedestrian crossings, just to name arbitrary examples. It's a very broad and deep agenda.
Before that, as you absolutely correctly mentioned, we should fulfill some homework, let me say so, about 12 quite well-known recommendations for the whole Georgian population. What's your personal expectations in these regards, and do you think that is there anything what threatens Georgian democracy?
My expectation is that Georgia can fulfill those 12 recommendations. It's in the hands of the Georgians and of the Georgian political system. I like to say the ball is in your court, but different than in sports, we are here to help you play the ball, to return the ball. And that's true of the Union, the European Union, the Commission, of all the member states. All our cooperation is geared towards supporting you. There are some areas where I believe more progress will have to be made. If you don't mind my saying so, one is the polarization. Mm-hmm. It's very important for Georgia to send a message. We have a consensus that we want this. We are all working in this direction, and we're working together on it. If the message that comes to the European Union is that the Georgians just can't get along and can't agree on anything, I don't think that's as helpful as it needs to be. But on the other hand, the government has a clear agenda, a clear legislative process. They say everything will be delivered in terms of laws by Christmas time, by the end of the year. So we're observing that. The process is important. It should be an inclusive process involving all political forces in the country. And of course, we'll have to look at the results. But as I said, it's really a teamwork. We're both, the European Union, its member states, and Georgia are working together on this goal.
Yeah. Before moving to the main interest of mine, I mean economics and business, there is one thing which really bothers me, and I think the whole Georgian community. Mr. Ambassador, we might not face so-called depolarization in general, but there is no polarization in regards of how we are moving towards the EU. That's where everybody is united, I mean, within them. But as you absolutely right mentioned, we might have the situation where polarization exists, but at the same time we have fulfilled all the obligations which are going to be definitely observed and monitored later on. I mean, the quality, the purpose, aims, all the recommendations. Do we have still a chance when the community is united for the aims that there is no polarization in this regard, that we are following EU, we want to be a part of this family, as you mentioned, the club?
Yes.
We see that the door is opening for us, but at the same time, internal political polarization still exists. it might be restriction for
No, you will.
this process?
You definitely have the chance and will have the chance. I mean, political polarization exists in other countries as well.
Everywhere, I think.
And
well, it depends on the level. Yeah.
It depends on the level, and a lively political debate is part of pluralistic democracies.
Absolutely.
It's the form of the debate, and can a consensus be achieved? What I notice sometimes here is that people don't argue about policy proposals, they argue about the legitimacy of the other person, of the other party. I think that's rather less helpful. So just, I would say, bring down the temperature a little bit, be careful about personal attacks, and be careful about delegitimizing other political forces. I'm not here to tell the Georgians how to run their politics, how to have their debates. That's not my job. Georgia is for the Georgians. All I can say is the impressions that some developments make on us Europeans. But the bottom line is, of course, you have the opportunity. The opportunity is here. I would just like to add, it's also now.
Yes.
You know,
momentum.
At the end of next year, the European Council will reconvene to see how the aspirant countries are doing. So we have around 1 year that really, really counts.
Thank you for this. Let's move to another favorite part of my job, I mean economics and business. Where do you see personally the potential of growing our economic relations? We do remain, Germany remains as a leading trade and economic partner of Georgia. That's the truth, submitted by and confirmed by statistics. And according to the data from 7 months, what we have confirmed, export has a 10% share in the trade between Georgia and Germany. But still, we know that there is no bottom or end up line in these relations. And where do you see potential as a person who might be and is just ambassador for first 3 or 4 months, but at the same time with a huge background doing economics in your previous jobs?
So I see a lot of upward potential. First of all, I think the general perspective from Europe to Georgia and the South Caucasus has changed. If I had come here last year, it would have been a different picture. We've had the Russian aggression against Ukraine that changes everything. And we've had the offer of the European Union to give Georgia the European perspective. So all of a sudden, Georgia is heading towards the EU under completely changed conditions regarding Russia.
Mm-hmm.
We said before you can't change geography, but we don't know what this outcome will be. But I would say that the attractiveness of Russia is suffering a lot. It's a shame. We want peace and stability and prosperity for Russia, but not a Russia that doesn't respect the territorial integrity of its neighbors and wages aggressive criminal military war against its neighbors. So all of a sudden, this region can develop a whole new dynamic. And there's the concept of the middle corridor.
Absolutely.
So if some trade and investment routes, economic development routes, let's call them, that used to go via Russia, all of a sudden are looking for a new direction, the Southern Caucasus region comes into play, and especially Georgia. because Georgia has many things going for it, a certain economic liberalism, history of being advanced in economic terms, and openness, cultural proximity. And this middle corridor, it's logistics, yes, and everything that's connected to it. But not only, it can be energy, it can be investment. I think the perspective of Georgia to German companies, and I'd like to support German companies in having this perspective, is can I have an early starter advantage by going to Georgia that will most likely join the EU at some time? So coming here maybe a few years before that happens, you can be established in a dynamic market with a regional perspective. And if I can just mention the one big project that kind of symbolizes this whole potential, and that's the electricity cable under the Black Sea. As you know, we're having a bit of an energy crisis in the European Union. We're having a climate crisis. We need energy, we need green energy. Georgia has the good fortune of having a lot of hydro potential power, but you also have wind power potential. Perhaps regionally we can add solar power. Producing green energy here, selling it to the European Union through an electricity cable under the Black Sea is just symbolic of this new regional economic perspective under new conditions.
Same was mentioned yesterday from EU Commissioner Borrell about the importance of this cable for the whole Europe, and the same political messages were delivered. Can you evaluate more specific about your personal efforts about developing this trade and economic business relations between Georgia and Germany?
Yes, so I mean, business is for the business people. The diplomats can have a supporting role.
Absolutely.
But one is to get the information out, make sure that everyone knows about potential. So I'll be speaking and writing about what I see here in Georgia, where I see potential, and trying to get that information to German businesses, and vice versa, informing Georgians about perhaps opportunities that
might occur,
that might occur, and not only specific business deals, but sectors that could be of interest. At the same time, of course, we have a lot of programs going in terms of development cooperation, where Germany finances private sector development, the development of renewable energy, legislation in certain areas that are relevant for business. And maybe I can just mention the one area of skills development.
Skills.
It's very, very important to Georgia. I mean, we all know we have an issue of companies not being able to find the skilled people that they need. On the whole chain of skills, from highly trained engineer just to a skilled worker. We all know also that there's an issue, a challenge, that Georgians are leaving the country to take jobs somewhere else. So of course, if we develop the skills of people in Georgia, that will lift the whole economy. And it's one of the focal points of German development cooperation. We have a team here now that's assessing a multi-million euro program that we want to offer to Georgia, where we work with the colleges to develop, we call it vocational training.
Education?
Yeah, training curricula. We work with the government to help them, support them in developing the legislation or regulation around. We work with companies to get them ready to train people. And we work with young people themselves to educate them about opportunities. And you know, sometimes people say, what's the secret of German export success around the world? Why are there small and medium-sized German companies that nobody knows their name because it's not a consumer product, but they're world leaders in technology, world leaders in sale in their sector. And one of the secrets that I can reveal,
What is the answer?
I don't know all the secrets, and if I did, I couldn't reveal them all, but one of the secrets is that German companies train their people. German companies invest into their employees. There's a saying that if you tell me it's expensive to invest in your people, just think about how expensive it is not to invest in them. And that's something in the DNA of German companies with our vocational training system, which ultimately goes back to the Middle Ages. And the key is that the state and business share the responsibility. They work together in developing the curriculas, in defining the types of jobs, the types of qualification that's needed. And you know, we have this trainee scheme, so the young people, by and large, who join that, they would leave after 10 years of school. They get hired by a company as a trainee, and their training is modular. Sometime on the job in the company, but in a well-organized process, and sometime, this is the state responsibility, in a vocational school where they then learn the mathematics and the geometry or physics. Legal environment, chemistry, personal skills. The key is really that business steps up and says, state, you and I, we're going to do this together. That way you train for really the business needs. You don't train a cohort of people who maybe have some theoretical knowledge, but the companies say, it's not really what we're looking for right now, and we have to pay again to continue training them.
Tell me, did you meet with local German companies already?
I have.
How do they do? And are there any concerns, any needs? Well, business is always asking and requesting, it doesn't matter Georgian or German, for more, but at the same time, what kind of feedback do you have from them?
Yeah, so there are a number of German companies that are doing quite well here. You probably know some of them that are in the building and construction material trade, some that are in business process outsourcing, quite large companies. I've met some agricultural companies, even some Germans are making wine here or growing other agricultural products.
You met a lot.
I met with investors into wind farms, and they're doing quite well. They're suffering from the difficulty of being able to hire skilled people. In fact, I met one company, they said we have a job opening, well paid for an engineer,
but no,
very difficult to find. So that's clearly a challenge. And there are some, I think there's many opportunities, as I said. There are some challenges, for example, in renewables, in the, how do you say, what is the scheme to determine the price of the electricity that you sell from renewables? It's not yet known. I think it's coming soon, but
CFD
and so on. So something new is coming, but it's been on hold for a while. So for an investor,
we need to know some specifics. Correct. Yeah.
For an investor, if he doesn't know the price of his product, the pricing mechanism, it's hard to do the project. There are some barriers, I believe, in agricultural investments that have to do with ownership of the land. I should add that I think quite interesting is the whole sector of tech. And startups. I've met with some Georgians working in that area. I see that there's a big tech affinity here. Digitalization is very spread. Everybody likes to use the apps. The Wi-Fi is strong. So I believe there's talent here that German companies could have access to. There's a regional dimension that German companies could access via Georgia. And vice versa, we can offer access to Germany, which is quite strong in startup kind of business, and through us into the European Union market, which we will soon both be part of. But perhaps Germans can also discover a young tech entrepreneur here who has a
Who
great
knows?
idea that may be going global soon.
Who knows?
And I hope it's not just gaming. I like apps that help to improve the world, that, on the environment, on traffic, on education, on useful fintech. So that's an area that I really think deserves more attention.
Yeah, going back to some figures and statistics, first half of the current year, the largest volume of investments from Germany was made in financial, real estate, agriculture sectors. And as you mentioned, you see potential in other sectors as well. Am I right?
Yes.
And are you specified with some areas already, or
I
it's
think
going to be like
renewables.
Renewables definitely.
Could be very good. I'm not sure whether we mentioned leisure, tourism, hotels. That's of course a sector that Georgia, being a wonderful, beautiful country that people love to travel to, has big potential, and Germany is very strong in all those areas.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Transport, logistics.
Infrastructure, maybe.
Infrastructure, always.
Always.
We Germans do good infrastructure. We're sometimes a little bit more expensive than competitors from other countries, but then
known as a quality.
Hopefully known as the quality, and that the price difference will be made up through longevity. And
during these first months, Mr. Ambassador, how do you evaluate the business and the investment environment generally in Georgia? I mean, including feedbacks from German.
Yes, in general, good.
In general, good.
Good. I think the regulatory environment is good. The ease of doing business is good, and I think the surveys bear that out. I would say, in a regional comparison, you do very well.
Very well. Can you be more specific, beside vocational education, about your plans for the upcoming year because of this uncertainty happening around? Are there already identified specific plans for further economic cooperation? And at the same time, just a few days ago, we've been facing the delegation, which was presented in Georgia as well. I mean, it was also presented from business people. So tell me about it.
A German delegation?
Yes. It was from the 7th till 10th of November. Am I right?
Yes. Yeah. So, I mean, next year the focus will be and should be on Georgia's path towards the EU, fulfilling the 12 recommendations and advancing on that.
Okay.
Because as I said, towards the end of the year, the European Commission and then the European Council will look and make an assessment. So that's absolutely a critical year. And a year is short. There's no time to lose. I think that's the main point. There's going to be a highlight in German-Georgian relations, and that's going to be the International Tourism Fair from 7th to 9th of March in Berlin. It's called ITB, Internationale Tourismusbörse,
Wow.
International Tourism Exchange.
Exchange.
It's the world's largest trade fair for the tourism trade, and Georgia is going to be the guest of honor. So it's a giant thing, both for the fair in Berlin and for Georgia. And I know many VIPs from Georgia will be traveling. You have a big delegation, and you'll be able to present Georgia as a tourism, leisure, traveling country to the global market, which assembles in Berlin for that occasion. So that's
hopefully we're going to be there just to picture everything.
Let's go together.
Yes,
I would like to go, yeah. And
so I will be definitely there as well.
And I hope that we will also have some high-level political visitors from Berlin.
By March?
Not necessarily by March, but in the next year.
I mean, for the next year, yeah?
In the next year, yeah.
You mean, yeah, okay. I got you.
Yeah.
Political. I hope that this business delegation will also be a part of this political.
Yeah, business delegations, like I said, I will really invest a lot of energy in bringing businesses here. The delegation you mentioned is part of a program by our Federal Ministry of economic affairs. It's one of the tools they have. They call it market research trips, where they organize, they do it worldwide, trips, and they say, we're offering a trip to Georgia. Who would like to find out more about this market? And the support of the government is that they organize the trip for a group and help organize a nice program, interesting interlocutors, so they can really get a feel for opportunities that exist. And all those things will continue. And
Okay, my last question comes from one of your public speeches, I mean the last one, where you addressed to the local community, I mean Georgian authorities and others, I mean guests. You've been mentioning twice Martin Luther King and Robert Schuman as well.
Yes.
Both of them. And mentioning we shall overcome.
Yes.
It feels, as an editor, I'm trying to feel speakers while not listening maybe them, but through the words. You mentioned about how do you see the future of the democratic countries and values uniting that? We shall overcome?
Yes, so I said this at my speech for German National Day, the reception that I gave here in Tbilisi on that occasion. And so if we're talking about European Union, Georgia joining the European Union, we're talking about the history of Europe after World War II. And I mentioned Robert Schuman because our answer to the horrors of the 20th century in Europe, to the horrors of World War II, the Holocaust, for which Germany was responsible, was that we were fortunate that in 1945, wise women and men said, no more war. How do we do this? And they came up with the mechanisms of the European Union. That's why I mentioned Robert Schuman. And we're facing today, globally, a challenge to the values of democracy, pluralism, egalitarianism. That's on the inside of countries. And we're facing a challenge internationally to what we call the rules-based international order, which means that there's international law, that we discuss things, we agree things through negotiations, and we settle differences also through negotiations and agreements. We don't settle difference through violence, attack, war, crimes. That we respect the right of every country to choose its own path, that we don't change borders through force. So all those things are being challenged. Russia is a clear example. There are other countries that also challenge the European view of what the right way should be. And that's why I mentioned Dr. Martin Luther King, who was a great civil rights defender in the United States, and he said, the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice. So I tried to put that into the context to say the European Union was Europe's answer to war, to fascism, to oppression, to injustice. And it may take some time, and it may go up and down, or history, people say, is a history a circle or a straight line? Well, it may just be a spiral, but I believe it moves forward. And in that same speech, I also mentioned that in 1989, the Berlin Wall fell, and in the early 1990s, the Iron Curtain fell in Europe, and history moved in a positive direction. And so I believe that in the long run, the values of democracy, equality, pluralism, and an international system that's based on law and respect for the others will win. And Georgia joining the European Union is part of that process.
I have another final wish. I do not have any questions for this time anymore, but I do hope that we're going to be a part of that spiral you mentioned. While during your being here in Georgia, Georgia will make huge, the final steps for being a part of the EU family. And I hope that I will enjoy and celebrate this membership process and Georgia's progress in these regards as well. So many thanks, Ambassador Fisher, for this. Thank you for being with us, and thank you for your interview.
Thank you so much. I entirely share your hope. I think it's a very justified hope. I like to say Georgia is already part of the European family, but now you want to join the organization.
Yeah, to legalize.
Family is like almost a birthright, something that comes naturally. But it's like in a family. If you want to join the family business,
here we are.
There's another level of tasks to be performed, but both are going to work out fine. So thank you very much.
The Checkpoint is presented by GM Pharma, the first international multinational pharmaceutical company in Georgia. GM Pharma, to serve those who need it most.